Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Bobby Sylvester, joined as always by Mike Tagliere. So guys, we obviously have a ton of news to talk about, and then at the end of the show, we're also going to be breaking down some potential league winners with Michael Fabiano, Senior Fantasy Analyst for NFL Media. We're really looking forward to talking to him. The first 30 minutes though, Tags, it's just going to be you and I. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I started week 1 research today, which is kind of crazy, but that's kind of where we're at, man. We're now rolling into the season. This past weekend was the biggest draft weekend of the year. I know there's still drafts going on, and we're not giving up on you guys, so don't think we're just going into week 1 already.
Yeah, I've got a lot of drafts this week, actually, and I've been practicing on the mock draft simulator text. First of all, this is the first thing that brought me to Fantasy Pros, as I was looking for something like this, and it was even better than I could imagine. I mean, you can complete a draft in like 5 minutes, man.
Yeah, no, it's really neat, and like we've had some people ask us if we're going to do articles based on, like, oh, if you're drafting on Yahoo, what are the values? Instead of doing that, like, all you have to do is basically go into our simulator, and you could choose to draft against Yahoo ADP, NFL ADP, whoever it is, ESPN, whatever you're drafting on. Understand that ADP influences how people will draft their teams. So definitely use that tool to your advantage.
So guys, I'm just going to tell you guys this really simple. It's fast. You don't have to wait for your opponents to pick. It's fun. Your opponents are going to draft using rankings from experts all across the industry, and it's free. You don't even need a Fantasy Pros account to use the draft simulator. Check out our draft simulator at fantasypros.com/simulator. Again, that's fantasypros.com/simulator. So, Tags, we have so much news to talk about. Obviously, the biggest of which is that Mike Evans is returning to practice.
Mike Evans returning to practice is obviously a big deal. Is he the wide receiver that's being traded? We don't know, but I happen to think that there's a lot bigger news we need to talk about.
We can maybe talk about that at the end. We have so much to talk about, Tags, that there's really not much time for nonsense or speculation. Maybe we can squeeze that in because it is really interesting to me. But obviously we have to talk about Andrew Luck, Lamar Miller. Let's start with Lamar Miller, though, okay? He's out for the season, torn ACL. I think everyone knows that by now. And it looks like Duke Johnson is going to be the fill-in. Yeah, they've got some other guys, Crockett, what have you. But right now it looks like Duke Johnson, or do you think they're going to make a trade? Maybe for Josh Adams, LaShawn McCoy, Adrian Peterson, or sign someone, Jay Ajayi, Alex Collins, or just wait to see who's cut. Carlos Hyde, Ken Dixon, or high upside guy like my boy Mike Boone, who's tearing it up, by the way.
I don't think they're going to make any more trades when it comes to like strictly for running backs. Now, if they make a deal with Jadeveon Clowney, sending him off to another team, I could see them trying to get a running back in return in that deal. But they should not be spending any more draft pick equity on running backs. They already gave up it looks like it's going to be a 3rd round pick for Duke Johnson. So I do expect Duke Johnson to actually be the number 1 in this offense. I mean, on the broadcast last night, I was watching the Steelers-Titans game, and Chris Collinsworth said that the Texans had signed Jay Ajayi. And as it turns out, that's not true, but there may have been some connecting the dots there where it's like he hears that they're interested in him. He's obviously cleared his physical, where Jay Ajayi might come there. That would clearly be a signing that would make me a little bit more hesitant in drafting Duke Johnson, because Ajayi has shown the ability to, be able to handle a bigger workload, whereas, Duke Johnson has never really shown us that. Not to say that he can't do it, but understand that Lamar Miller over the last 3 years with Houston has averaged over 18 touches per game. That's a big role to fill.
I would argue Duke Johnson has showed us it, just not to people paying attention to NFL only. In college, he had 22 touches per game his junior year, right before he was drafted. I think this guy can be a 3-down back. I think it makes sense that they would sign Ajayi. I think that's probably what's going to happen. And if that's the case, yeah, I would draft Duke Johnson right around the Austin Eckler range, because I think there's a similar chance that he starts and a similar chance that he's just a really good 3rd-down back, and that Jay Ajayi would be that boring 1st, 2nd-down plotter, kind of like a Jordan Howard type, who, yeah, he's probably going to end up around running back 30 or whatever if he plays the full season, but you never really want to start him outside of bye weeks and injuries. Is that what you would think if they signed Jay Ajayi?
Yeah, that's pretty much where, I'd remain fluid with it, because obviously it's a situation that we need to monitor, but when they give up a 3rd-round pick for Duke Johnson, it tells you that they kind of value him an awful lot, because we saw guys like David Montgomery and Damian Harris go in the 3rd round of this draft, so it's clear that they value him.
All right, so Tags, let's cut right to the chase. What is the upside for Duke Johnson?
RB2 upside. And I said that about Lamar Miller, that he was one of my favorite value picks in the draft before the whole, trading for Duke Johnson thing, because that obviously capped a little bit because they're going to use Duke Johnson. But now, if they don't sign a big name, I'm tempted to move Duke Johnson up ahead of guys like Josh Jacobs. He's part of a much better offense. The offensive line may be a concern, but when you have DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, and Kiki QT out there healthy with Deshaun Watson, that's not going to necessarily, it's going to take the pressure off the offensive line a little bit when it comes to their run blocking. And Lamar Miller has finished as a top 24 running back in each of the last 3 years. So Duke Johnson, yeah, RB2 is definitely within the realm of possibilities. Am I going to say RB1? I don't know if I'd go that far, but he plays for an awesome offense, and the opportunity is definitely there.
I actually think there's a little bit more upside than there was with Lamar Miller, because Lamar Miller, we know what he is. Duke Johnson, there's a little bit of that unknown. We know that Duke Johnson can be great on third downs. What if they use him in first and second downs too, and he's just a pure workhorse? You don't trade a third-round pick for a running back that you don't think can be that guy, I would imagine. So I think there's a chance that Duke Johnson really blows up. With that said, Tags, where are you drafting Duke Johnson at this point? I've got him RB28, just behind Tevin Coleman, Phillip Lindsay, and just ahead of Tariq Cohen, Miles Sanders.
Yeah, I slotted him in as RB26. He's right in that tier for me with Phillip Lindsay and Latavius Murray, where it's like those are guys that could turn out to be much more than RB3s, but that's where I feel confident drafting them. So, once you get past guys like, Mark Ingram, that's where I start looking at someone like Duke Johnson. And if you're in a PPR format, he obviously carries a little bit more value, even though, Houston haven't targeted their running back position much over the last few years. But if you're in a PPR format, here's the question. It's like, we're going to obviously talk about this here in a second. Would you draft Duke Johnson in a PPR format over someone like Marlon Mack?
In PPR, no, I don't think that I would, just because we know Marlon Mack can get 25 touches a game. Duke Johnson, I don't really have any idea if that can be the case. Marlon Mack had 4 games where he ran the ball over 20 times, and now they're talking about using him on third downs too. They've been doing it in the preseason. I think he's a true 3-down bell cow this year. And I was excited to get him. He was a target before this happened. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I don't know if Duke Johnson has that kind of upside.
That's fair. That's fair.
So for those of you guys who are new to the show, Tags and I try to stick to just fantasy. We do have some fun sometimes, but this Andrew Luck news is just too big to not just talk about everything that happened, even outside of fantasy football. So, Tags, it's really remarkable. Everybody was surprised. Among all the guys who could have done this, I guess Andrew Luck would have been your first guess, right? But a 29-year-old retiring at the top of his game, he could have been right there in the first tier of quarterbacks. You can even argue that he already was. The Colts were Super Bowl contenders with Andrew Luck. This is just a huge blow. I'm happy for him, but for football fans, it's just kind of sad. I would have loved to see him end out his career playing into his late 30s.
Yeah, for sure. And, the way it happened is the biggest thing here is that, watching that game. So obviously I'm from Chicago, and the Bears were playing the Colts this weekend, and we were having our home league draft as this is happening, right? And we're in the 8th round, which is around the territory where Andrew Luck would typically go. And all of a sudden, my buddy John, he just calls out and he says, Andrew Luck is retiring, and he's reading it off his phone. And I'm like, you're reading a false report, dude. Stop falling for those fake reporters. Because the thing is, and I didn't have an alert on my phone at that time. And then I looked down and I checked, and sure enough, Schefter, verified Twitter account saying that Luck retired. And all of us were just dumbfounded. And all of a sudden on the TV, they're showing Andrew Luck standing there on the sideline talking to Jacoby Brissett. And it's I think that those players just learned about this. And
I think Brissett had to have known for a couple days. There's no way Luck doesn't share that with him.
I don't know. He looked surprised on the sideline, really, this just came out. And then all of a sudden there's booing, and there's people holding up their Luck jerseys with a price tag on it that they just bought. And he's booed as he comes off the field. And
that sucks.
No, there was so much. And the thing is, you get caught up in the moment, and maybe people may have overreacted to it. And, I don't want to say that defines their entire fan base, but understand that Andrew Luck, it takes a lot to, be on top of the game. Literally you were an MVP caliber player last year, and to walk away from a game, that's on him. We can't say that it's selfish, because the guy, it's his life. We can't say, oh, we're going to miss you on Sunday, so how dare you? No, it's his life. It really sucks that it happened. I'd love to watch Andrew Luck play, but watching that press conference happen because of the timing was the craziest thing, because it's
because he was caught off guard. He wasn't prepared to do it his way. He had to do it on their timeline, and I hate the way that it ended, but the way he presented himself, man, it was brilliant. I loved seeing it. This guy is just he's fantastic in every way. I love Andrew Luck.
Yeah, are you one of those people that thinks that there's a potential chance that he plays again?
I'll tell you what, Tags, when this news first came out, the very first thing I thought is, Hey, isn't his dad in charge of the XFL? Now,
No.
okay, guys, that's not going to happen, but that was my very first thought is Andrew Luck going to join the XFL? Now that I see the way this is going and everything, obviously that's not going to happen. I don't think he plays again. If I'm in a Superflex Dynasty League, and I've got him in our Dynasty Analyst League tags, I drafted him in the first round 3 years ago. Even if there's a 10% chance Andrew Luck comes back in a Dynasty Superflex, I'm hanging on to him because I think that it could happen.
Yeah, it just really sucks. But I mean, the fallout, obviously, we have to talk about it from a fantasy standpoint, is what it means for the entire offense. We've seen T.Y. Hilton without Andrew Luck before, and it wasn't pretty. He was a wide receiver 3. I think that was where he finished, but it was more about the inconsistencies in his performances. And I know that, Jacoby Brissett may not be the same quarterback he was 2 years ago. I know that it's a brand new offense under Frank Reich, but there's also a lot more mouths to feed since that time. Eric Ebron was added to the offense. Devin Funchess is there on a 1-year deal. Chester Rogers started to carve out a role last year. They drafted Paris Campbell. Where did you slot in T.Y. Hilton with this news? Because me personally, I have him in wide receiver 3 territory. I think I slotted him in as my wide receiver 26 behind guys like Tyler Lockett.
He finished wide receiver 24 with Brissett in 2017. They didn't pass as much because Brissett didn't know the offense. He was traded right before the season started because of the injury news with Andrew Luck, and they had to go get a solution. He did fine. I think he's got more upside than that. He also played a full 16 games. He's 30 years old now. I don't think Hilton's as good as he used to be. I've got him right now as my wide receiver 26, and I'm wondering if that's low enough.
Yeah, I put him at 28, and then I was like, maybe I'm overdoing this. Maybe I should move him up a little bit. But it's clear he's in the tier with those guys like a Kenny Galladay, a Tyler Boyd, DJ Moore. Those are the guys that you have to consider him around. Like even a Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon obviously comes with some risk, but if he's on the field, I think that you would rather have Josh Gordon than T.Y. Hilton, right?
If he's on the field, I'd much rather have Josh Gordon than T.Y. Hilton. That's not especially close for me, Tags. I want the upside of Calvin Ridley, Allen Robinson, A.J. Green, Corey Davis, Cooper Kupp over T.Y. Hilton. I like Hilton's safety. He's going to be fine. He's durable. But I don't think I'm going to get any shares. I would imagine he's not going to drop far enough for me to get any shares.
That's basically where I'm at.
All right, guys, we're going to talk about the rest of the pass catchers for the Colts here in just a minute. But first, I want to talk to you about NFL Game Pass. Only with NFL Game Pass are you going to get every out-of-market preseason game live. And with the preseason underway, you can start now with NFL Game Pass. You can get your first look at all the rookies and all the players on new teams. It's all the action, all the football you can handle all in one place. I'm most excited to watch the Green Bay Packers and their new defense this preseason. They added Rashawn Gary, my boy Darnell Savage, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Adrian Amos. This defense is going to be hot this year, and I can't wait to watch them play. And with NFL Game Pass, I can watch the Packers live if I'm out of market. If I miss the game, I can replay it after it's aired. Whatever game you want to watch this preseason, you'll need NFL Game Pass to do so if you're out of market. Can the Browns show early signs of being a playoff contender? Do the Vikings have all the pieces in place to make a run in the NFC? Is there any chance the Panthers are going to challenge the Saints and the Falcons in the NFC South? Make sure to see all the action this preseason with NFL Game Pass. And best of all, you can kick off the 2019 NFL season with a 7-day free trial of NFL Game Pass. Sign up now at NFL.com/FantasyPros. Devin Funchess was someone I wanted to target before Andrew Luck was dealing with his calf/heel injury, whatever it was. At this point, I think Devin Funchess might be undraftable in a 12-team redraft league. Tags, what do you think?
Yep, I moved him down my draft board significantly. He's outside the top 60 wide receivers. He's not someone that I want to target because I can't see a situation where Jacoby Brissett's throwing 25, 30 touchdowns. I don't see that as a range of outcomes. So therefore, Devin Funchess cannot be the 2019 version of Eric Ebron that I thought he could potentially be. So yeah, Funchess is off my radar.
So let me ask you this, okay? Are you drafting Jamison Crowder, Zay Jones, Traquan Smith, Marquise Brown ahead of him?
Yes, most of those guys you mentioned, definitely. Because Traquan, he at least offers you upside. Like if he gets into the starting lineup, I would even take someone like Ted Ginn over him just because Ginn right now is the starter in 2 wide receiver sets for the Saints. And is it possible that, Traquan eventually passes him? Sure. But when Ginn's been in the lineup, he's been like a decent wide receiver 3 more than half the time. So yeah, I think that's better. It's a better scenario than someone like Devin Funchess. And then even someone like Marquise Brown, it's like you're taking a home run threat. It's like, it's possible if Lamar Jackson improves as a passer and the Marquise Brown gets over this whole Liz Frank thing that he turns into like a Deshaun Jackson type player. And that gives you spikes during certain weeks. Like he's the type of player that you might want to put in your lineup during bye weeks because he can like prop you up and he may bust and that's fine. But I would rather take someone like that than Devin Funchess, who is really just boom or bust.
Yeah, Funches is really a touchdown or bust type of guy, and I don't really love that. Like, he could finish. I think his upside's wide receiver 4. That's not good enough to have on your roster, guys. But it's not going to be the kind of wide receiver 4 where you can trust him week to week, like Jamison Crowder, where he's, going to get receptions. He's going to be relevant. Maybe he also gets in the end zone. It's going to be, Devin Funches scored 2 touchdowns. Next 3 weeks, he goes for 5 receptions for 38 yards combined.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. It's very possible. And that's the fallout, man. It's just like this team is it's just not as potent. It's not to say...
I think they're still competitive, but I mean, the Texans have to be... It's amazing, right? The Texans lost Lamar Miller, and their chances to win this division are, maybe twice as high as they were before Lamar Miller got hurt?
Yeah, I mean, we watched the Titans last night. That was a disaster. Like, that team does not look very good right now.
A.J. Brown looked really good, though. I was surprised by that. I moved him up my rankings like 10 spots.
I mean, he's not going to get on the field right away.
I'm not drafting him. I'm just saying, like, if you're in a much deeper league best ball, I might take a flyer on him.
I don't want to trust anybody tied to Marcus Mariota or Ryan Tannehill right now. Like, that line looks terrible. And then, like, without Taylor Lewan for the first 4 weeks, like, the Browns are playing the Titans in week 1, and Mariota with Myles Garrett coming after him, like, that's going to be nasty. Like,
I don't know. They've got a pretty good offensive line, but Lewan being out, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and they took a step back last year. I know they added Roger Saffold from the Rams, but at the same time, it's just... they have not looked good. And Mariota, I have no idea why he was pulled as early as he was. Like, I would have kept him on the field, be like, you have to show me something, man, because he looked terrible.
So I think it goes without saying, if Devin Funchess is outside both of our top 60, that Paris Campbell is as well. Now, eventually, he's going to be someone you can add on the waiver wire if he does get in the starting lineup. Paris Campbell's speed is awesome. He's got a lot of upside eventually. Man, it just sucks. I was thinking, when Andrew Luck comes back, he could be really good, but he's not coming back, man. It's just so weird.
It's sad, really. I mean, like, that's the thing, is like, it's sad because we're missing out on somebody that could have been great for a long time, but it's okay. And that's, I just keep going back to that whole thing. Don't hate Andrew Luck because he walked away. Don't call him,
He could be saving 10 years off of his life.
It's possible. That's the thing, is people don't realize, like, when you walk away from football, these guys, they don't walk as well as I do at 36 years old. They don't walk as well as some other people. Like, when they get to 50, they're going to be like literally like limping around, and that's why they're paid for what they are, and
they're still giving him the money. Isn't that just so respectable by the Colts? And I think that they're doing it because they appreciate him, but also, like, if it was even possible he might come back, he's feeling pretty good about going back to the Colts, right? Because they took care of him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the FantasyPros account, like the main account, actually tweeted out after that news took place that they have had Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck for the last 20 years, and they have one Super Bowl to show for it, which is like, that sucks.
Yep, it sure does. A lot of people are moving Eric Ebron way down their rankings and Jack Doyle. Tags. Jack Doyle had 80 receptions when Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback. T.Y. Hilton had 57. In fact, I want these guys maybe a little bit more, if you can believe it.
I don't want him more. I moved Eric Ebron down to my tight end 14.
Well, I just mean in terms of where their ADP is going to be. I moved them down my rankings. I'm just saying it's more likely I'll end up with Ebron now.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because I've done a few analyst leagues, and Ebron actually went for cheaper than Jack Doyle in an auction. So, like, people like are so down on Eric Ebron that he's probably going to go like undrafted at this point. And then Jack Doyle was already someone that was probably undrafted. So if you want them with your final pick, I don't have an issue with that. I moved Ebron down to my tight end 14, Doyle 20. So it's like, I just don't want to tie myself to Jacoby Brissett on a weekly basis if I can help it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that. He does love his tight ends. Andrew Luck loved his tight ends too, and part of that was probably because he didn't have many pass catchers besides T.Y. Hilton. But I had Eric Ebron as my number 10 tight end, and he was going, 7th? At this point, I've got him tight end number 13, and he's probably going to go around 17th or 18th. So I don't mind him so much anymore. Now, we also need to talk about Marlon Mack. This is kind of a big blow to him because he was so game script dependent last year. I don't think that's going to be the type of running back he is, though, since they're using him on third downs. In fact, he might even get more touches. They're going to run the ball more. It's not like they're going to pass the ball 40 times with Jacoby Brissett.
But why are we buying that they're going to use him on all three downs when they have Nyheim Hines, who they drafted last year, with Marlon Mack on the roster?
Because that's what the Colts are telling us, and that's what they've been doing in the preseason.
I think it's just talk.
Marlon Mack was their third down back his rookie year when Frank Gore was the running back.
I know, but that's basically saying Nyheim Hines didn't do his job last year, and he did. He did it fine. Like, he was really good in that role, whereas Marlon Mack is like, he can catch passes. I'm not saying that he's like incompetent, but I'm saying it's more like, why are we believing them? Like, why did they draft Nyheim Hines if they believed that Marlon Mack was a 3-down back? They could have just drafted Jordan Wilkins and been okay. everything that they're doing is like, from signing Spencer Ware, adding him to the team, and then like he gets hurt, and then adding Deontay Foreman to the team, and then he gets hurt. And it's like, it's a revolving door. They clearly want more depth at that position. So it tells me that I don't think that they're happy with just Marlon Mack carrying like the entire load. I think that they want to mix it up with Nyheim Hines. I think they want solid depth on their team because Marlon Mack hasn't been able to stay healthy throughout his career to this point. So Mack, to me, I mean, I have him as RB21. I don't feel great about it, though. I do not feel great about it.
You know what? I think what you're saying makes sense, but I'm never going to pretend that NFL teams are going to do what makes sense because it doesn't always go that way. And if they're telling us this, I'm inclined to believe it. I've still got Marlon Mack as my number 17 half PPR running back. He's not a target anymore. I had him as a target as my number 12 fantasy running back, but I wouldn't mind getting him in the 5th round.
Yeah, I just don't know if you're going to get him there anymore is all. Like, I compare him to someone like Derrick Henry now, where it's like, he's more game script dependent. He's not going to be used in a pass catching role, like because Deion Lewis is there, Nyheim Hines is there. So I view them very similarly, but I have Mack ahead of Derrick Henry because I think the offensive line is better in Indianapolis, and I think they have a better offense in general in Indianapolis because Frank Reich.
Yeah, I think that's true as well. All right, and then we need to talk about Jacoby Brissett as well, just briefly for super flex leagues. When we saw him play, he was traded right before the season. They hardly passed. They ramped up his passes in the middle of the season. He was quite a bit better. He had one of the worst offensive lines. Now he has maybe the best offensive line. He had Frank Gore. Now he has Marlon Mack. He has Paris Campbell. He's got Eric Ebron. I think this is going to be a better situation, but I'm still drafting him outside of my QB2s.
Yeah, I have him at QB 25 right now, and
exactly.
It's like he's in that range with like Andy Dalton and Sam Darnold, where it's like I don't think that Dalton or Darnold are guys that you need to target, but I think the job stability.
They're also not losing their job though.
Right, job stability is a real thing. So it's like if you want to go with Brissett because he has job stability, that's fine, and he should present at least somewhat of a floor with with his rushing capabilities. But remember, he is a little bit older, and he may not run as much as he used to.
That's true, Tex. All right, man, so let's move on and talk about some of the other stuff that's been happening. Jerick McKinnon is apparently going to practice. I thought he was going on the IR, and now he might play.
Who knows what's happening with Jerick McKinnon? I mean, if there's one thing I know for sure.
I wouldn't draft him. Let's just say that. He's the number 3, and it's a long shot for him to play a useful amount of snaps.
I would agree with that, and I would also say that I don't think anybody knows what the hell is happening in San Francisco. Like, what?
Dante Pettis is playing into the 4th quarter, Jags. I was just talking about, like, hey, I might draft Dante Pettis. His ADP's coming down too much, and then they're doing this garbage saying he might not even start. I can't do it. What is Shanahan doing, dude?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, that's the best way that I can describe right now. It's because I do not know. It's like it seems like Kendrick Bourne and Marquise Goodwin are going to be the starters, and they're going to have Trent Taylor.
No.
Like, forget the guys that we've used a 2nd-round draft pick on the last couple of years. Let's just do this instead. I don't know. I'm starting to get to the point where I got with like I don't want to say it's Hugh Jackson levels, but where Kyle Shanahan might just be better as an offensive coordinator than a head coach.
Maybe it's just like Gruden, where Gruden just realizes, hey, my team sucks. I'm going to blow it up and get a good draft pick. Maybe Shanahan's like, Jimmy G is not good. We're going to get a top 5 draft pick and get ourselves a quarterback. Justin Herbert, you're on the team in 2020.
Well, it sucks because like I just talked about that depth chart, and it's realistic possibility that they can have Jalen Hurd out there as like a movable chess piece. They could have Dante Pettis and Deebo Samuel out there as wide receivers. Marquise Goodwin could be a solid field stretcher. They can be a decent unit, but knowing that he's playing into the 4th quarter, this is ridiculous. Like, Dante Pettis flashed last year that he can play in the NFL.
Maybe he's just trying to motivate him. I have no idea. But you can't draft him as a wide receiver 3 anymore. You can't do it.
But he's also risking injury, though, too. Like, by keeping him out there, like, you're putting the player at risk of suffering an injury. And it's like, what are you doing? I'm losing it with Kyle Shanahan. And I'm sorry because he's fantastic as an offensive coordinator, but he has not been very good as a head coach.
Also, Christian Kirk, by the way, I don't know if you've seen this. He's played 40% of the snaps that Kyler Murray's been on the field, so that is a big red flag. I moved him into my top 30 wide receivers a week ago, and I'm sorry if you've done your draft and used my ranking since then. I just moved him outside my top 35.
No, some of these players that we're talking about, like I'm not moving Kirk down much, but like some of these players we're talking about that we're moving down because of this and because of that, it's actually moving Robbie Anderson up my boards, which makes me scared because I never wanted to draft Robbie Anderson, but now suddenly...
At least he's safe. At least he's going to be on the field 80% of the time.
That's true. Like at least we know that, and that's why he's moving up my board. But like guys like Marvin Jones have moved into the top 35 in my wide receiver rankings, and it's like... That happens, and I keep saying that I think Sammy Watkins is undervalued. I mean, I've gotten to the point now where it's like you're talking about these players that you had so many hopes and dreams for. It's like that's all they were, is hopes and dreams. At least we know Watkins will be on the field when in playing for Patrick Mahomes when he's healthy.
I mean, how many games has he played? Or he missed 3 games, 8 games, 1 game, 6 games.
Don't take the wings out of Sammy Watkins' sails.
I'm still mad at him for losing that bet for me, man.
But if Watkins plays, like, let's say he plays 14 games, I think Sammy Watkins finishes as a top 30 wide receiver, right?
I think so too.
Yeah,
I would agree. Okay, just a couple other pieces. Yeah, I've been excited about Justin Jackson, but it looks like the Chargers aren't going to use him the way... it could change, but Austin Eckler's been doubling Justin Jackson's snap count with the first team. Malcolm Brown is being held out with Todd Gurley because apparently the Rams have such big plans for him. It looks like Malcolm Brown is the clear-cut handcuff to Todd Gurley at this point. And then, as I mentioned, Mike Evans is back. Odell Beckham is back at practice.
Yup.
Okay, so Tags, we do have a little bit more time, so let's speculate, okay? Who's that big-name wide receiver that could get traded? Apparently, it was close to happening. I would imagine at this point it must have been T.Y. Hilton.
I don't think so.
Because the Colts knew for 2 weeks that Luck might retire.
I don't think it was ever T.Y. Hilton. They don't have someone far enough along in, like, the career progression. Like, we like Paris Campbell, but he's hurt. He's missed training camp. Devin Funchess is on...
He's back in practice now, by the way.
Funchess is on a 1-year deal. I mean, I've speculated that it could be like Mike Evans because they do love Chris Godwin. They have Brashad Perriman, who they've talked about an awful lot.
Yeah, and I don't think the Bucs are going to compete this year. That's a good call.
That's where I was trying to think about it all. And, like, Alshon Jeffrey makes a ton of sense. Like, if they're really high on Arcega-Whiteside, like, if that's, like, where they're at with him, like, I could see Alshon Jeffrey being moved because he's someone that still produces in the NFL. And if a team's, like, a competitor and they're looking for a receiver like someone like Seattle, that would make a whole lot of sense.
I've also heard Tyreek Hill and Antonio Brown, and those could make sense. I wouldn't be surprised if either of those guys got traded.
No one is trading for Tyreek Hill right now. Like,
right. I don't think so either.
Yeah, I saw that name floated out there, and I was like, no chance in hell that he's the one. There's no way that someone's trading for him right now.
I've also heard people say Adam Thielen or Stephon Diggs. Guys, just because they have 2 good wide receivers doesn't mean they're going to trade one of their only 2 receivers. So I don't think it's one of those guys, and I don't know. Anyone else you could see, Tags?
Not really. I mean, I hate speculation because nothing might even come of this, and we might never even...
It's just fun. Like, I mean, it's not relevant fantasy advice, but everyone listening is, wants the wide receiver to be traded to their team and wants to know who it is.
For sure.
I think it's going to be the Seahawks, by the way. If anyone trades for a wide receiver, it's the Seahawks. They got the cap space. They need a wide receiver.
Yep.
All right, guys, we're going to have Michael Fabiano on in just a moment, but first I want to tell you a little bit about Fantasy Draft, the only rake-free daily fantasy site in the business. They've partnered with Hooters to bring you the largest guaranteed rake-free contest lineup in the history of daily fantasy sports, including the $1 million Hooters kickoff. That's right, Fantasy Draft is hosting the first rake-free contest with a guaranteed prize pool of $1 million. Listen, as other fantasy sites continue to raise rake, prize pools are being squeezed, making it harder for players like you to win. Whether you call it rake, commission, or management fee, the days of paying 10, 12, or even 15% or more of your entry fees to fantasy companies are over. No longer are you going to lose 30% of your bankroll to the house. Only on Fantasy Draft are 100% of the entry fees paid out to contest winners 100% of the time. To access all of Fantasy Draft's exclusive rake-free contests, including that Hooters $1 million kickoff, all you need to do to become a member is sign up at fantasydraft.com today with promo code FantasyPros, and you'll get a free 7-day trial membership. That's fantasydraft.com, promo code FantasyPros, all one word. Don't miss your shot at this incredible $1 million rake-free contest, and it's a $100,000 top prize. Hey, and by the way, before we get going, I want to let you guys know we're on Instagram now. If you're not on Instagram, you're actually missing out on some great fantasy football advice that we have there. You can check us out at FantasyPros, and Tags and I are at our same handles as we use on Twitter, at Mike Taglier NFL and at BobbyFantasyPro. All right, guys, and we're now joined by our guest, Michael Fabiano. He's on Twitter at his name, Michael_Fabiano, and we're going to be talking about potential league winners. So we're just going to go around and share one person at a time. Michael, thanks for coming on the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, man. It's a little bit of the crazy season right now, but it's all fun. It's always like the last couple of weeks in August that everything just gets nuts because you've got all these requests to do interviews, plus the shows, plus trying to do your own drafts. So it's a fun time of the year.
Right, yeah, and we really appreciate you carving out the time to talk to us. I know our listeners are absolutely pumped about it, and this is a really great show to have you on because we're going to be asking basically about your guys. Tags, I love this segment.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. And I think Fabs hit the nail on the head saying that basically our drafts kind of take a back seat into doing everything else that we do with our job. So this is basically where our league mates are listening to these shows and saying, oh, I'm going to take this guy or I'm going to take that guy. So let's just kick this thing off, Fabs. Like, who's the number one player that you want in every league because you believe that he can be a league winner?
See, now I don't know if I want to talk about this because I still have like 10 drafts to do. And I know people are going to be, trying to get on some of these players. One of the guys that I really love is Chris Godwin, and I was in on him last season, and I'm back on the train, especially after everything that happened in the offseason with the Buccaneers trading Deshaun Jackson and losing Adam Humphries. This team has a ton of available targets. Godwin is a guy who's not coming off the field, according to Bruce Arians. So this offense is going to be one that's going to throw the ball quite a bit. And Godwin is a guy that I love at that position. He would be my top sort of get in terms of players who haven't established themselves as really good fantasy players yet, but who have a ton of potential to do that in 2019.
So are you reaching for him in the back end of the third round? Because he's going in the fourth round in a lot of drafts.
Yeah, I've been actually lucky to get him in a couple of leagues at the end of the fourth round, but third round is a little too rich for my blood at this point. There's guys I want. That doesn't mean that I'm going to reach too far to get them. Now, especially not in the early stages of a draft, because there's just so many good options out there. And as much as I love Godwin, I'm not going to reach for him, for example, if a player, such as Adam Thielen is still on the board, or a player like Stephon Diggs. So I'm not going to reach past those guys, or an Amari Cooper. But I might be looking at taking Godwin ahead of players who might be ranked ahead of him, but are in close proximity, like, for example, a Kenny Galladay, a DJ Moore, who is another player that I'm really into coming into this season.
So Tags, Chris Godwin only played 64% of the snaps last year. For instance, that's less than Keelan Cole played for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there's room for him to improve substantially. Mike Evans is talking about, hey, it's a competition between me and Chris Godwin for the wide receiver 1. What is his upside without a Mike Evans injury, Tags?
I mean, I like Godwin an awful lot, and as he mentioned, that basically with Bruce Arians coming in, he's playing that Larry Fitzgerald role, and that's why I've kind of bought into the fact that hearing about this big name wide receiver that's potentially available, I thought Mike Evans could be that guy. With the Bucs not necessarily being a contender right now, knowing that they have Godwin as a guy that coming out of college reminded me of like a Pierre Garçon, a guy that could do it all, a guy that can rack up 100 receptions in a season, and knowing they have the recipe for success for a passing game with a bad defense, no run game, no pass catching running backs. Chris Godwin is someone that he's moved up my board significantly, and I think that if you want him as your wide receiver 2, you're going to have to draft him. The third round is rich, and that's the thing. I think that Fab's like hit the nail on the head here, is because he said you want to reach for these players because it's eliminating the value you're getting with them. The part of the reason that they're league winners is because of where they're going in drafts. Because we like someone like, let's say it's like, if I like Jameis Winston, I'm not going to reach for him in the fourth round because I love him and I think he could be a league winner. It's because I'm able to get him later in drafts and I don't have to spend that high equity to get them.
Yeah, and also keep in mind, too, Bruce Arians has leaned on slot receivers during his career as an OC and a head coach in the NFL. Larry Fitzgerald had success under him. Hines Ward had success under him. And, the Buccaneers' leading slot receiver from last season is no longer on the roster, and that's Humphries.
Yeah, nailed it. That's a great call. I want to take a look at league winners in the past couple of years. James Conner, Kareem Hunt, Alvin Kamara. Some people would say Patrick Mahomes. He broke the record for the most fantasy points in a single season for a quarterback. But Tags, the fact of the matter is, in terms of value over replacement, he was merely just inside the top 20. Now, that's good. But Todd Gurley, I think, had the highest value above replacement. And then all those guys who were drafted later in drafts like James Conner. Who's your first league winner, Tags?
Mine is someone that you definitely have to get in the first round if you want him, or maybe the top of the second. I want to make it known that Odell Beckham is a league winner. Like, I don't know why some people have I literally have gotten him in drafts at the beginning of the second round, like where it's like, if I'm at number 9 or 10, I feel like David Johnson should probably go there. And it's like, wow, I can't pass on David Johnson, so I'll take him. And if Beckham makes it back to you, it's just stupid. Just because Odell Beckham, over the course of his career, this is a stat I like to share. So I basically break down, what wide receivers have done in terms of wide receiver 2 numbers, wide receiver 1, all that. Over his career, Beckham has posted wide receiver 2 or better numbers in 73% of games. There is no other wide receiver that has played since 2000 who has hit more than 64.5% of the time. And that's Julio Jones. And that's with Eli Manning as his quarterback. Now you go to Baker Mayfield. I know Baker didn't have great stats in this third preseason game, but if you actually watch that game, there's some throws there that Odell Beckham comes down with that maybe Rashard Higgins doesn't. Odell Beckham has record-breaking potential this year, and to find that in the second round is sometimes just stupid good. Again, you're going to have to draft him like around in between that 10 and 14 range. But again, if you have the chance to get him there, I suggest you do.
So Beckham has started 56 games in his career. Here's his 16-game pace: 109 receptions, 1,585 yards, 12.9 touchdowns. That would have been the single best fantasy season since 2015 for a receiver, and he accomplished that with Eli Manning, guys. Michael, do you think he has more upside than DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, Julio Jones?
I think he's closer to Julio. Nuke and Adams to me are they're one tier, and then you have the next tier, which is also elite players, like Julio and OBJ and Michael Thomas, that kind of thing. Now, I will say this: the upgraded quarterback is ridiculously just enticing, because you go from Eli, who has a noodle arm, who still was able to help Odell Beckham Jr. put up great numbers. Now you have Baker Mayfield, young guy, and a player who's going to take chances downfield, and he's going to utilize that weapon in Odell Beckham Jr. So I could see OBJ giving you 90 catches for 14 or 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns. With that being said, there's a lot of weapons in Cleveland now. So Jarvis is there. Nick Chubb could be a first-round league winner, at least until Kareem Hunt comes back, and then sort of all bets are off. But David Njoku's going to be a red zone threat. He's going to see more good opportunities in the middle of the field because the Browns have OBJ and Jarvis Landry in the mix there as well. So a lot of mouths to feed, but the Browns didn't go out and make that splash not to utilize Odell Beckham Jr. just as much, if not more, than he was used when he was with Big Blue.
Tags, I would agree that among the top 12 wide receivers, he has the highest likelihood of being a league winner. It just depends on if he can stay healthy. I love his situation. I love his skill set. But he's been someone who's been injured quite a bit in the past. All these soft tissue injuries do concern me. That's why I've got him as my wide receiver 4. But, man, he's got some great upside. I love it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is, like, some people, including myself, like when he first went to Cleveland, it's like, okay, it's his first year. It might take some time to develop that chemistry, but we can't forget that Odell Beckham, as soon as he walked in on the Giants offense, even after missing the first, I think, 4 to 6 games with that hamstring injury as a rookie, he dominated right away. And that's after missing a lot of training camps. So with Mayfield being as accurate as he is, and someone that I've compared to like a Drew Brees type quarterback, I'm loving this potential here.
All right, guys, my first league winner it's probably not going to surprise many of you. He's my number 2 must-draft player behind Justice Hill. It's Latavius Murray, running back for the New Orleans Saints. When people think about high-end backup running backs, Darwin Thompson comes to mind, Tony Pollard, Rashad Penny, Darrell Henderson. You can get those guys later, but I think the back with the highest upside is Murray. Check out this stat from JJ Zacharyson at Late Round QB on Twitter. He says since 2011, the Saints have been the number 1 or number 2 fantasy running back committee in the NFL. Latavius Murray comes in and directly takes over for Mark Ingram. I think he's a better goal line back, not quite as good in the receiving game. But if anything happened to Alvin Kamara, Latavius Murray would go bonkers. We've seen him touch the ball 300 times before. Yeah,
Fabs, are you comfortable like with Latavius Murray as someone that you kind of stick in your flex, like even to start your league, and then if something happens, obviously you have handcuff value, is like he would walk into like a top 6 running back role?
Yeah, he's in one of those situations. But of course, the worst case scenario would be Alvin Kamara getting injured, and then Murray would come in and be an RB1 based on that offense. And they're also trending towards more of an offense that's going to run the football, especially with Drew Brees, who's 40 years old. We're seeing the pass rate in New Orleans, decline over the last 4 seasons. We've seen Drew Brees' pass attempts, passing yards decline over the last 3 seasons. So they're going to be a team that's going to lean a little bit more on that running game. And I would agree that Murray's not that same type of back as Mark Ingram is in terms of being a pass catcher, but he can easily have standalone value in this offense based on the touches that Ingram was getting per season and per game while he played, because remember, he missed some time last season. And if you also add in the fact that Murray's going to see his share of the goal line opportunities as well, he certainly could end up being a flex starter. I would probably guess more in a 12-team league than a 10-team league, but he does have the potential to be a standalone player, and that's what you want at the running back position when you're drafting a guy who is behind, say, in Denver, Phillip Lindsay. Well, Royce Freeman could end up seeing enough touches this season to have some standalone value. You mentioned Darrell Henderson in Los Angeles, although the preseason hasn't been as great as we've sort of hoped in terms of his performance on the field. He could end up etching out like a Chris Thompson sort of role. McVay showed that he can do that back in Washington with Thompson, who was a tremendous pass catcher when he can actually stay on the field. So I do agree that in a 12-team league, Murray could end up developing standalone value as a flex starter.
All right, guys, before we move on to round 2 of our league winners, I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Burrow. Hey, guys, when you're looking for new furniture, there is a lot to consider. Like how you're going to get it in the door or up the stairs, of course, or how you'll inevitably move it. But thanks to Burrow, you don't have to stress about any of that. Burrow makes simple, adaptable, easy-to-move furniture that can be assembled and disassembled in just a few minutes. Plus, it ships to your door fast and free. Burrow's clever design means it's easy to set up, easy to move, and easy to add or remove seats as needed. Burrow sofas feature naturally stretch and stain-resistant fabric, sturdy hardwood frames, and soft, non-toxic foam cushions. That's my favorite part. There's even a built-in USB charger, if you can believe it. Burrow's totally customizable. You can pick one of 5 fabric colors, 3 leg finishes, 2 armrest styles, any length, and you can even add an ottoman. Plus, they just launched the Nomad Leather Collection, which is beautiful, by the way, featuring their same convenient design, now with the option of top-grain Italian leather upholstery. At Burrow, 1-week shipping is always free, and they stand by their furniture with a risk-free 30-day return period. Give your living room the upgrade it deserves with a Burrow sofa. Get $75 off a new sofa and free 1-week shipping by visiting burrow.com. That's burrow.com/fantasypros. That's burrow.com/fantasypros for $75 off a new sofa. All right, Michael, so who do you have as your number 2 potential league winner?
There's just so many guys that I'm high on. And one of the guys that I've really talked up is Kyler Murray. And maybe talking about a rookie quarterback as a league winner is not a popular opinion, because typically rookie quarterbacks are going to have their growing pains, and Kyler's going to have his growing pains. But great stat from the perspective of a rookie quarterback who can run with the football. Since 1999, 5 such quarterbacks have finished in the top 10 in fantasy points at the position. All 5 of them either rushed for 500 or more yards or rushed for 5 touchdowns. I think Kyler could do both, and if not, be damn close. There would not be a person in the fantasy industry who would be shocked if Kyler had 480 yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns. And just those stats alone are going to put him in that potential QB1 category, because we all know how important it is for a running quarterback to compile those yards and those touchdowns and those fantasy points with his feet. We've seen it time and time again. We've seen it with quarterbacks who weren't good at throwing the football, like Tim Tebow. Hell, Terrell Pryor, before he moved on to be a wide receiver, had some value as the Oakland Raiders starting quarterback. We've seen it with Vince Young. We've seen it with Robert Griffin III. We've seen it with Russell Wilson and Cam Newton and Dak Prescott. It's really an important part of a quarterback having success in his first season. In fact, most of the quarterbacks over the last decade plus who have entered the NFL and had success have had that dual threat. They can run with the ball. So if Kyler gives you 3,200 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, and maybe 13 or 14 picks, but he gives you near 500 rushing yards and around 5 touchdowns, that's right in the QB1 conversation. I know his ADP at one point had gotten a little bit out of control. Then he had that one bad preseason game and it kind of cooled off a little bit. But I can still see Kyler coming off the board in the 9th or 10th round and ending up leading people to a fantasy championship, and that's a good value.
So, Tags, Michael's talking about Kyler Murray potentially having 500 rushing yards, which I think is a very fair estimate. We look back at Michael Vick. He had seasons of over 900. He had one season the year before he went to prison of over 1,000 rushing yards. What is Kyler Murray's upside as a rushing quarterback this year as a rookie? I mean, they're going to be running 70, 75 snaps per game.
Yeah, I know that's what they're shooting for. Unfortunately, I don't know if the defense is going to be able to come off the field. Like, their defense is in really bad shape. And that typically leads to more pass attempts and less rushing attempts where, you go back to Michael Vick's days in Atlanta and, obviously the rushing attempts stacked up. Lamar Jackson going to be the same way. I think Kyler's more of a passer than someone like Lamar Jackson, so he may not get into the absurd, carrying the ball, like setting records. Basically, even though he didn't start until week 10, Lamar Jackson set the record for rushing attempts by a quarterback. I don't think we're going to get to that level with Kyler Murray, but I've said it. If Kyler Murray starts all 16 games, if he stays upright for all 16 games, he is finishing as a top 12 quarterback, rookie or not. It's kind of like going back to Cam Newton. He can give you Cam Newton type rushing numbers, but he's a better passer than Cam Newton. The question is, will his offensive line keep him upright? Because that offensive line is another one that's unfortunately in bad shape. Can Kingsbury's offense overcome that? Running 4 wide receiver sets, that's going to kind of divert some of the attention, lighten the boxes, basically, that David Johnson and Kyler Murray are forced to see every single week. Whereas, like, if it was last year in the same exact offense, it would have been pretty ugly. So I'm definitely on board with Kyler Murray if he could stay healthy.
So, Michael, Tags and I have talked about this idea before. Like, who are the guys who could finish as the number one quarterback at the position? Obviously, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Aaron Rodgers come to mind. Cam Newton has done it. He was really good last year before the injury. I guess that's possible. Matt Ryan has done it recently, so that's possible. Besides that, the only other guy I'd put in the conversation, I think, is Kyler Murray. Do you think that is in the realm of possibilities?
Number one, that would be rough, but what do we know about the NFL? The only thing that's predictable about it is that it's unpredictable. So I could see Kyler being as high as top 8. It's such a deep position, though, guys. And Mahomes will regress, but he's still going to put up great numbers. Watson, to me, is the one guy that I could see surpassing him in fantasy points this season, especially with improvements on the offensive line. Aaron Rodgers is always a threat to be the number one guy, but there's very few. Like Baker Mayfield, I think he's going to break out this season. Most people in our industry with a brain in their head feel the same way because of what he did under Kitchens last season, and he did it without OBJ. But I don't even know that he's a contender to be the number one quarterback in fantasy football. Definitely top 5. So for me, it's really Watson and Kyler. I feel like top 8 would be phenomenal for him.
I mean, I guess that's fair. At the same time, last year, I think a lot of people would have thought it was crazy if we said Patrick Mahomes throws for 5,050 touchdowns. So
everyone was on Mahomes last season. Like, he was like one of my 2 or 3 favorite sleepers. And the whole industry was on him because we saw what Alex Smith did the year before. I mean, Alex Smith, people forget, he was like a top 3 quarterback. He was unbelievably good. And then you put a dude with a hand cannon in there, and, you know, he had a year to learn under Alex Smith, and Andy Reid's had a lot of success in terms of his quarterback. So that to me was less of a surprise than it would be to have a Kyler overtake someone like Mahomes or overtake someone like Watson for the number 1 spot.
All right, Tags, let's go to your number 2, buddy. Who do you have?
Number 2 on my list is Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is, I've mentioned the show before, you have to risk it for the biscuit here. He's a 3rd-round pick, and that's fine. But when we're talking about running backs that could potentially be taken in the top 6 overall picks next year, Aaron Jones fits that description. Playing alongside Aaron Rodgers has a lot of benefits, and one of those benefits was last year, looking at NFL's next-gen stats. He saw 8-man fronts just 13% of the time, and that was, with a very vanilla offense. Hopefully Matt LaFleur can, take a step forward as a play caller, because unfortunately with Tennessee last year, it wasn't great. But with Aaron Rodgers, it opens up a lot of things. And we saw Aaron Jones in a lead role last year from weeks 8 through 14 before he got hurt. He was the number 5 running back in fantasy football. And there were a couple games in that stretch where Jamal Williams had 7 carries. So I believe that it only takes 15 touches a week for Aaron Jones to finish as an RB1 in fantasy football. And if he does what I think he can do in terms of producing over what's expected of him, he's going to finish as a top 6 fantasy running back, and that's going to be a league winner.
To put it into perspective, Alvin Kamara is being drafted at 1-2, 1-3 in a lot of drafts. He gets 17 touches per game. So absolutely, Aaron Jones can finish as a top 12 guy with just 15 touches, and he's got upside for more. Let's hope the Packers use him right. Michael, what do you think about this call?
The only thing holding Aaron Jones back is maybe durability issues. He missed the end of last season, and if he can stay upright for 14 games, and I'm not even saying 16, for 14 games, he could potentially be a top 15 running back. Everything that you mentioned is true. He's not going to face stacked fronts as long as Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback there in Green Bay. He's got a lot of opportunity to become better than Eddie Lacy was during Eddie Lacy's 2-season stint there as a fantasy stud in Green Bay. I love Jones. I love the upside. If there's one downside, I want to see him out on that football field playing, if not a featured role, close to a featured role for 14 to 16 games.
You mentioned Eddie Lacy, 2013 running back 6, 2014 running back 6, and I think we all agree Aaron Jones has more upside than that. Now, whether or not the Packers use him that way is the real question. Here's my number 2 league winner, and this one's going to rub some people the wrong way, but I'm here for it, okay? So prior to Le'Veon Bell, when's the last time we saw a superstar hold out for an entire season? And then Le'Veon Bell's decision backfired supremely. I mean, his contract was nothing with the Jets compared to what he was demanding from the Steelers. I think Gordon's camp has to realize that failure and just admit the true value of running backs in today's NFL. At this point, I think they're probably wrestling for a few $100,000 rather than, trying to get their absurd demands meet. Even if he doesn't play until week 4, and I think that he does, he's going to outperform his ADP. But if he starts in week 1, we're getting a guy in the 3rd round, sometimes in the 4th round. Listen to what he did prior to his injury last season, okay? Prior to his Week 11 injury, Melvin Gordon had 1,189 total yards, 11 touchdowns in 9 games. That's a full season pace, guys, of 2,100 yards, 19 scores, 373 fantasy points. That would have been the number 1 running back last year by 30-plus points. And you can get this guy in the 3rd round. If he plays the whole year, he's going to win leagues.
Where are you at on this one, Fabs?
I don't know that he's going to start the season on the active roster. I don't know that. I feel like he's dug in, to be quite honest with you. And I've talked to insiders about this. There does come a point where he's going to have to return because it's going to affect his free agency moving forward. But from what I've heard, the Chargers are dug in and Gordon's dug in. And I mean, dude, he's losing a lot of dough right now. I mean, he's losing cash for missing camp. He's losing cash for missing preseason games. And this is his stand. I mean, this really is his stand. So could he eventually be worth that 3rd or 4th round pick? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've also seen situations in the past, Larry Johnson, Steven Jackson, Darrelle Revis, just to name a few, where guys have held out for an extended period of time, come back, and they're either not as good or durability becomes an issue. And I think that's kind of a concern for me too, as far as Melvin Gordon goes. I'm hoping for the best case scenario. I'm hoping he's in the backfield with Phillip Rivers come week 1. I just don't see it. And I could see a scenario where he misses 6 games, 8 games, 10 games because he's trying to make that stand. He's going to do it as long as it doesn't affect his free agency moving forward. Because if he stays out the whole season, he's basically in the same spot as he was in 2019.
Sure. So at what point in the draft are you willing to take him? Would it take him lasting until the 4th round?
He's coming off the board right now in the 3rd or 4th round, and it would probably take the 4th round for me to go out and get him. Yes.
Tags, what about you? Where are you pulling the trigger at this point?
Honestly, I was doing my home league draft this weekend, and I took Julian Edelman over him in the 4th round in a PPR format. So it does take a lot of falling for Melvin Gordon because with Fabs here, I don't believe he plays to start the season. I don't know. I'm not positive on the contract in regards to how many games he has to play in order to accrue that year towards free agency, but it seems like it's a minimum of 4 games, if not 8 games. I remember we heard the same story about Le'Veon Bell last year about he's going to come back. It's just a matter of when, and he never did. Running backs have it so hard right now, but I would rather take a chance on someone that's proven. Like Devonta Freeman's going in his range. I'll take Freeman. He's tied to a high-scoring offense behind a solid offensive line. The breaking point for me now would probably be I might take Melvin Gordon ahead of someone like Marlon Mack.
Wow. So that's an interesting take because everyone, and we see fantasy Twitter exploding. Everyone's talking about how Marlon Mack's value has fallen so much without Andrew Luck. And I would agree that it has fallen because you're going from Andrew Luck to Jacoby Brissett. But let's not forget that Frank Gore was the RB19 the season that Brissett started 16 games in the absence of Andrew Luck in 2017. And Frank Gore's 100 years old. And Marlon Mack is a young guy with upside who's projected to be a featured back. You can't tell me that even with Jacoby Brissett, who should be better, by the way, you can't tell me that Marlon Mack shouldn't be a top 20 fantasy running back in 2019 with Brissett under center. I understand the fantasy industry. A lot of the time we freak out one way or another, and it's typically extremes. And I think there's been an extreme freak out with Marlon Mack. Does losing Luck hurt? Yeah. Does it suck that game script could be an issue for Marlon Mack? Yes. He's got a great offensive line in front of him, 5th ranked based on Pro Football Focus, and he's averaged 4.5 yards a carry during his short career. If he stays healthy for 14 to 16 games, Marlon Mack could be a top 20 fantasy running back in PPR leagues, and I think he could do it quite easily.
I love that call, Michael. Let's move on to the 3rd round. And what we're going to do here is it's going to be a little bit of a lightning round. So we're each going to name 2, 3, 4 other league winners that we're not able to get to, and we'll break down just one of them. So who do you have left, Michael?
Out of a long list, I'm going to go with D.D. Westbrook. D.D. Westbrook's certainly moving up in terms of his fantasy value, but he's not a guy you're going to have to take in your top 50, maybe even top 60 picks. And he is going to lead that Jaguars team in targets. There's no doubt in my mind. And with a quarterback who's actually going to throw the football to his teammates more often than not, because that was a big problem with Blake Bortles during his career. Although, isn't it unbelievable to think that Blake Bortles has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback. It's just wild.
It's nuts.
Top 3.
with all things being equal, he wasn't a good real quarterback, and he threw the ball to the wrong team too often. Westbrook, as I mentioned, is someone who you can probably get in the 6th, 7th, 8th round, depending on the competition in your league. And when you look at the coaching trends, John DeFilippo coming in to be the offensive coordinator, I think that's a good sign for Westbrook, because when DeFilippo was in Minnesota, Adam Thielen, was a stud playing out of the slot. Stephon Diggs had a top 12 finish. So Westbrook is someone who could be drafted as a 3 or a flex, who could certainly outperform his draft position. And even in an offense that's going to run the football with Leonard Fournette as the bell cow, I still think there's plenty of opportunities in that offense for Westbrook to become the guy for Nick Foles.
Tags, I know you've got big feelings about this one, man. What do you have to say?
Yeah, my issue is that he was the guy last year, and granted, yes, he's got a quarterback upgrade, but he saw 101 targets last year, and he finished as a wide receiver 3 or better just 43% of the time. There was actually, honest to God, the numbers side by side, Mohamed Sanu was a better fantasy player last year than D.D. Westbrook, and yes, the upgrade to Nick Foles does call for a raise in the rankings. The change in offense does call for that. I still believe they want to be a run-first team. I'm not all in on Nick Foles, where it's I don't think he's a guy that's going to throw 30 touchdowns. That offensive line is obviously a work in progress. I tell people I don't mind D.D. Westbrook, the player. I mind the situation where it's he's on some sites he's up to the wide receiver 32, wide receiver 33. I'm unwilling to take him ahead of someone like a Sammy Watkins, where I know the ceiling. I think best case scenario with D.D. is that he's in that wide receiver 3 range, and that's fine. But when I'm picking a player in that range, ideally, I'm searching for someone maybe a Curtis Samuel, where I think the range of outcomes, his ceiling is much higher. I'm going to take some more risk doing that, just because Westbrook is someone that's locked in for 100 targets. But it's looking for the better offense that could provide a little bit more oomph to my team in terms of will I win a fantasy championship because I drafted D.D. Westbrook? And I just don't see that being the case.
The great thing about our industry is that we can agree to disagree.
There you go.
Yep, absolutely. Michael, did you have any other names you want to throw out there before we move on to tags?
Sure. You mentioned Curtis Samuel a second ago, and Samuel is someone who's really gained a lot of steam in the fantasy industry. And, dude, listen, again, a lot of times people sort of overreact, and there's a lot of extremes. So I don't think that Curtis Samuel is going to come out and become a fantasy superstar and a top 10 wide receiver, but based on where he's being drafted, based on the opportunities that I feel like he's going to get, Devin Funchess, of course, no longer in the mix there. We like DJ Moore a lot, but Samuel is someone that could certainly be a very effective asset for your fantasy football team. David Montgomery is another player with 270 available touches with the absence of Jordan Howard, and that backfield in Chicago, who could be, based on his 4th round ADP, a pretty nice bargain when all is said and done. You can also talk about a guy in Baltimore at a position that is very, let's just say, up for grabs after the first 5 or 6 players. Mark Andrews, who had a quiet 500-plus yards last season and could end up being the top guy for Lamar Jackson. And based on where his ADP is, which is the double-digit rounds, if you can get a tight end who's putting up top 10 numbers at that position, you've probably punted the position until late and we're hoping to hit a home run. And I think you could end up hitting a home run with Mark Andrews, because he is a player in a run-based offense that is going to be utilized as a pass catcher, mostly because he's got a rapport with Lamar Jackson, and everything that we've read and everything that we've seen coming out of camp in Baltimore is that this guy at times has been the most dangerous player on the field. I mean, their number 1 wide receiver is a rookie in Marquise Brown, who's barely done anything in the preseason because he's been banged up. And unless you love Willie Snead, Mark Andrews should see a lot of targets in that offense.
All right, Tags, why don't you give us a couple more names?
Yeah, the one name I want to mention is Sony Michel. Sony Michel, if he remains upright, I think that everybody on this podcast, everybody listening to the podcast can agree that he would score at least 10 rushing touchdowns if he remained upright for all 16 games. I think that's a lock with him. Did you know the last running back, even in half PPR formats, who scored double-digit touchdowns, who finished outside the top 15 at the position, was Michael Turner back all the way in 2012. Basically, it just doesn't happen. So Sony Michel, if he's involved a little bit more in the passing game, which we've heard out of camp, if he stays upright, there's so much goodness here. And if you really do feel the need to handcuff someone, Sony Michel with Damian Harris. Damian Harris costs you, around that 10, 11 round range. And it just so happens I would take Damian Harris even if I didn't own Sony Michel. So that's a great tandem there. OJ Howard is someone that I believe that can be a league winner. Again, going back to the conversation of finding someone down the draft board that could potentially be drafted in the top 2 rounds next year. I think OJ Howard's the next guy to be considered with the George Kittles, the Zach Ertzes, and the Travis Kelce's. And then, again, Jameis Winston. Everything about that team screams pass attempts, and knowing that they have Bruce Arians there calling plays. If Dirk Cutter was still there calling plays, I'd still like Winston, but not nearly as much. I have confidence in Bruce Arians. I have confidence in the fact that there's no backup that's going to dethrone Jameis Winston. He has some of the top pass catchers in the league, including OJ Howard, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. So if we like all those guys, why don't we like Winston more? He's my QB8. He could be a league winner. And don't forget, last year, the top 3 fantasy quarterbacks were all drafted outside the top 10 rounds in fantasy football. Jameis Winston's going to be one of them this year.
All right, guys, I know you're sick of hearing some of these names, but again, there's some people who are listening for the first time, and they've got their drafts coming up, and I just want to encourage everybody, if you're doing your draft right, I think you get Darwin Thompson, Tony Pollard, Justice Hill in rounds 10 through 12. These are the best high upside backup running backs in football in my mind. Thompson's in the Andy Reid situation. Tony Pollard is playing every snap for the Cowboys with Ezekiel Elliott out. And then my favorite guy that I want to highlight is Justice Hill. He's my number 1 must draft guy. He's in an offense that ran the ball 45 times per game once Lamar Jackson took over. It's going to come down to 35, but that leaves a substantial workload, like a Tariq Cohen type of workload for Justice Hill, who is electric. And if anything happens to Mark Ingram, he's 30 years old, mind you, I think Justice Hill could be a superstar in this offense. Michael, what do you think about Justice Hill this year?
Yeah, I'm in on that. In terms of late round flyers, I would also add Devin Singletary to that list. I would add Alexander Madison to that list as well. You mentioned Damian Harris is another good one. Running backs are going to go down. It happens every single season. And if you're able to grab one of these players, and you have to be smart about it too. Dalvin Cook, I love Dalvin Cook. This dude has not played a lot of football the last 2 seasons because of injuries. And if that trend continues, Madison could end up being a guy who's a league winner. Just like you mentioned with Sony Michel. I like where his ADP is right now, but we all know that that knee could be problematic. And in a scenario where that knee becomes problematic again, Harris could end up being the guy. So you want to be smart about those late round running backs. Pick guys who are young, who have high ceilings if they get to be in featured roles, who are playing behind veterans, or running backs that are, well, let's just say less than durable.
All right, guys, that's all for today's show. Michael, it was a pleasure having you on. Thank you again for carving out the time.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.
All right, and I want to say thanks to the sponsor of today's show, Burrow. Get $75 off a new sofa and free 1-week shipping by going to burrow.com/fantasypros. And also Fantasy Draft, where they've got the first $1 million rake-free contest. Get your free 7-day trial at fantasydraft.com, promo code FantasyPros. And also NFL Game Pass, get your 7-day free trial to NFL Game Pass by signing up at NFL.com/FantasyPros. Also, don't forget to check out our Instagram page at FantasyPros, at Mike Teglier NFL, and at BobbyFantasyPro. And also check out our draft simulator, which Tags and I absolutely love, at FantasyPros.com/simulator. It's fast, it's fun, and it's free. FantasyPros.com/simulator. For Michael Fabiano and Mike Teglier, I'm Bobby Sylvester. Thanks for listening, and enjoy your football.